Hey, this is Jason, the lead developer behind Spectrum Break, which is the game you see here. I'm just creating a little video about the history of the game so far. So the game actually started as a little game jam idea. A game jam is where a bunch of game developers get together to try and make a game in a short amount of time. Usually it's 48 hours, so you get into groups, uh, have a blast making games in 48 hours, and by the end everyone plays each other's games. So I'm just going to go over to one of the starting videos. This is around the time where I started actually recording gameplay. So after college, I decided that I wanted to poke around with the idea a little bit more. I still had some of the level sketches because we didn't end up actually using the idea for the game jam. So early on, it was actually like this is actually far beyond what you see here is actually far beyond where I started, where I started almost everything was static in the level. It was just a couple platforms that you were pushing around, but I got kind of bored with myself. I was alone at the time, just working on the game, and to entertain myself, I threw the script on everything in the world, and the whole world started falling apart, and I realized that uh, I had a blast doing that, so I end up keeping that, and I decided that end up becoming one of the core moments of the gameplay, me just giggling while throwing script on everything. So around this time, I took a little bit of time off, and I worked on a little camera tool that you see me using in the game, so which is why you have some pretty smooth camera movement going on, even early on. But when I came back to the game, the player at the time was still moving kind of like the player didn't rotate at the time. They were just straight up and down. And I kind of was just poking around with stuff at the time and tried it. Initially, it was just as like an animation thing. But honestly, with how the physics moved, being able to rotate the block, therefore rotate the player and change where you were jumping, like that I just enjoyed poking around with that, so that ended up becoming a pretty core component of the game. But what I realize is, uh, since to my knowledge no one's made a game like that before, uh, getting the rotation controls right was pretty hard. I spent about 4 to 5 builds or 4 to 5 weeks just on changing the rotation controls around, poking around with it. Uh, Like the buttons were pretty well set. I have two alternative rotation buttons that you can try. But exactly what to automate and how much to automate was a pretty big early on. I found a really mathy way to make the subtlest adjustment to a wall jump when your face gets pushed into a wall to make it hard to just climb all the way up to the top by smashing the jump button near a wall. And even though early on I was kind of like automatically rotating yourself a little bit when you jumped, I removed everything that was related to that. So it was just making wall jump a lot smoother than it originally was, and making you stand up straight when you fell down. So once I got that right, and actually you'll see around here, I started to really get a little more inventive in not just trying out some of those original puzzles ideas, but poking around with other level designs as well, like how I'm teaching the player how to move. And like this level you see here as actually one of the game level sets currently in the game. But I ended up realizing that the game was pretty hard, so I ended up adding a whole bunch of levels in between. Like as a game developer, you generally have an idea of some of the stuff that you want to teach players, such as how to move, what the controls are, some mechanics and stuff. But there's certain like little things where you'll be adding something and you kind of realize, oh wow, that's a little early to be teaching that, or I need to do that little. Uh, I need the learning curve to be a little less steep. So I end up going around back, adding some levels that are currently in the game. I have about 9 right now, and there are 5 in the demo. Also around this time, I was poking with visuals. I'm not an artist, but I do know quite a bit about shaders, so you'll see here I'm starting to add not just particle effects, but the glow effect as well. Uh, Originally, the growing out from the center was just a side effect of adding the glow, but I really like it, so I end up keeping it. So I end up smoothing the glow later on, and I've been polishing the particle effects up. The player here, around here, I also increased the player's weight, I believe, because I want the player is moving very fast, but didn't hit the platforms very far. So I kind of I kept those a little bit closer together. Here you can see I finally added a tutorial for the controls. Up until this point, I originally had this as level 1, because in this level I teach you how the platforms work, make sure you know how to hold the jump button down, and I teach you how your player's rotation affects your jump. Also around this time, I started to animate a little stickman. Like, I don't think stickman's going to be in the final game. I plan on removing it, but I was just poking around with using the acceleration of the player as how reanimating the player. So you see, depending on the most recent acceleration last frame or so, uh, well actually now it's the last 2 frames so because I've smoothed it, the player will animate a little bit. So this is actually the current gameplay where I've smoothed stuff around, I smoothed out the glow, the particle effects are a lot nicer. And let's see, the saving loading in the menu works, that was about a couple builds ago. As far as future ideas go, I think that right now I'm just working on some background stuff, and of course I'm eventually going to change the player character. And there's a whole bunch of like other mechanical like platform ideas I had in mind. Like you saw early on, there was this platform that had an arrow that propelled itself in a certain direction when you touched it. Like that's like I really want to make a whole load of puzzles related to that. That's coming up later. And beyond that, I'm polishing the game. Right now, I kind of work a side job while I'm working on the game, but we'll see how popular the game becomes. Wish me luck.